Session number 1 of Bristol, Forestville, Recycle, Then and Now, began with a montage of Bristol, Forestville scenes that no longer exist and have been lost to history, such as the following. This was followed by a discussion of the redevelopment era beginning in the 1950s and extending through the 1960s. Reasons for its tragic results within our community were described, as well as how the development of the Bristol Shopping Plaza by Spartacus Carpenter and the continuous expansion of Route 6 provided the death knell to a retail commercial center in downtown Bristol. The next section covered the repurposing of many buildings constructed during the American Industrial Revolution, which focused on the expansion and diversity of manufacturing. The majority of these were developed during the second half of the 19th century. These included, amongst others, the Bristol Manufacturing Company on Riverside Avenue, founded in 1837 by a group of clockmakers. It manufactured knitted cloth and underwear. This is now the home of the New England Carousel Museum, which was founded by its first director, Bill Finkenstein, in 1989. The Bristol Brass and Clock Company, established in 1850, was later renamed the Bristol Brass Corporation. It closed in 1982 after 132 years of production and having survived 5 major wars. Many of its buildings have been recycled. Its corporate headquarters are now utilized as lawyers' offices, while the rolling mill hosts Bristol Fine Arts and several other offices. The highly popular Liberty Recycling Company is also located in its former buildings. Housing established for its employees included 1st through 6th Streets. The Sessions Foundry on Farmington Avenue was organized in 1879 on Laurel Street. It moved to Route 6 in 1895. Establishing a picturesque front lawn for its employees' enjoyment, it closed in 1954. A shopping plaza was opened here in the early 1970s. Known first as the Hub 6 Plaza, it has been renamed to the Bristol Commons. The J.H. Sessions and Sons Company, first located on Main Street, moved to North Main Street circa 1869. This company manufactured trunks and trunk hardware. Experiencing a significant business increase, a new modern brick plant was constructed at 273 Riverside Avenue in 1907. Closed in 1994, it is now being renovated for sale as an apartment complex. The Dunbar Spring Shop and the Wallace Barnes Company, with an on and off type of relationship, worked together manufacturing a variety of spring products. They eventually separated and became competitors, but merged again in 1953 as parts of the Associated Spring Corporation. The former Wallace Barnes Administration Building is now being recycled by the D'Amato Company as a state-of-the-art, multi-purpose, multi-tenant facility known as 10 Main Street. Moving to a 221,000 square foot facility on the Memorial Boulevard in 1970 as part of the redevelopment movement, the closure of this facility was recently announced. The Horton Manufacturing Company from Oak Street relocated to North Main Street and manufactured fishing poles and other fishing gear, a variety of golf clubs, and archery equipment in its North Carolina facility. The Bristol Fire Headquarters now occupies the land where the Horton Company once stood. The E. Ingram Clock Company was founded by Elias Ingram circa 1859. Its former wooden buildings on North Main Street were replaced by brick buildings between 1902 and 1904. Due to the redevelopment movement, the Ingram Company moved to Redstone Hill Road in 1958. The McGraw-Edison Company purchased this company in 1967, renaming it its Busman Division. Closed in 1991, it is now occupied by the Raleigh Spring and Stamping Corporation and the Bristol Adult Education Center. The land of the original Ingram Company, which stood on North Main Street, has been repurposed as the De Lorenzo Towers and Ingram Manor of the Bristol Hospital. Albert and Edward Rockwell founded the New Departure Bell Company in 1888. Renamed the New Departure Manufacturing Company in 1901, it was located on North Main Street, extending to West Street. It also maintained facilities on Center Street. Over the years, this company manufactured a variety of bells, bicycle coaster brakes, and ball bearings and bearings utilized worldwide in most mechanical devices. A subsidiary of New Departure from about 1908 to 1910 manufactured the Haupt Rockwell car as well as taxi cabs. The former administration building is now known as Progress Square and accommodates a variety of offices and businesses. Other buildings serve as dental, physical therapy, and chiropractic offices. One New Departure building on Center Street now contains Jesse Morton's antique classic car restoration facility known worldwide. The Firefly Brewery and other businesses are also located here. The New Departure Manufacturing Company also provided housing for its employees, constructing both the Endy Inn on North Main Street and Endy Manor, which includes Sherman, Putnam, and Mill Street, directly off of Route 6. Many of these manufacturers acquired vast industrial wealth and utilized this opulence to construct elaborate and prestigious homes. Over time, many of these have been recycled or repurposed for alternate purposes. The former Greek Revival home of Chauncey Jerome, an outstanding Bristol clockmaker, later owned by the Dunbar's family, now serves as the Bristol Elks Lodge on South Street. The Victorian trim and cupola were added by Joel Case. The Ingram family owned several homes located on the Federal Hill area. William A. Ingram, one of several presidents of the Ingram Clock Company, constructed a Queen Anne terracotta home with a brownstone granite base in 1892 on Prospect Place. At various times, it served as the home of the American Red Cross, was the office of obstetrician Dr. William Furness, and hosted an architectural firm. The Movia Robotics Company and the Federal Hill Financial Services are now currently located here. William S. Ingram, general manager of the Ingram Company for 40 years, built a 25-room house at 156 Summer Street. This served for several decades as the Connecticut Conference Center of the United Church of Christ, known as the Ingram House. Like the William A. Ingram House, it was heated by underground steam conduits from the Ingram Company on North Main Street. It is now a private residence. The former home of Edward Ingram, son of Elias, the founder of the clock company, was designed by Joel Case. Located at 173 Summer Street, it burnt completely to the ground. This site became the home of the Trinity Episcopal Church, dedicated in 1947. This building is now being utilized by the Congregation Meta of Connecticut, a Hispanically based religious philosophy. John Humphrey Sessions and his son, John Henry, founder of the Sessions Foundry Company, in 1880s, built elaborate homes on High Street, designed by Joel Case. These are now multifamily dwellings known as the Bellevue Hall Apartments in the Bellevue Manor. DeWitt Page, who became president of the New Departure Company, lived at 91 Bellevue Avenue. He constructed a mansion on Grove Street and moved there in 1917. He and his wife May contributed land to the city to establish a municipal park, which now bears his name. Unfortunately, due to vandalism, his home was taken down in 1971. The accompanying carriage house was demolished in 1981. Only the stairs leading to the house remain. A little-known fact is that architectural plans were designed to locate Tunx's Community College on his estate. Albert Rockwell and his wife Nettie first lived at 208 Summer Street in a house built for Clifford Barnes in 1876. Barnes was co-owner of the Burwell and Barnes Coal and Ice Company on North Main Street. Designed by Joel Case, it still remains as a private residence. Helen Atkins McKay, daughter of Elijah N. Welch, purchased land on West Street in 1896 and began the construction of a granite castle, which cost her $150,000 before her death in 1910. Only the exterior was completed when Albert and Nettie Rockwell purchased it in 1911 for $30,000. They completed the interior features. The edifice would become known as Brightwood Hall. After Albert's death in 1925, the castle was put up for sale in 1928. The Catholic Diocese of Hartford purchased the stone, marble, and bronze in 1936 for $10,000 after the castle was disassembled. These were utilized to build St. Anne's Church in New Britain. The garage and superintendent's lodge are now private residence, while St. Demetrius Greek Orthodox Church is located where Brightwood once stood. Session number 2 will begin with the story of the lifestyle of the rich and famous on Bellevue Avenue and how many of these ornate or elaborate homes have been recycled for other purposes. Amongst the many aristocratic families of our city, the Sessions and Treadways owned at least 6 houses on this street and were able to control more city affairs than any other families. This section will also describe several Forestville industrial facilities that still exist and how they are being utilized today. Joel Case, an entrepreneur, inventor, and finally a home builder, deserves a special mention before starting this section. He might be described as eccentric, but at least eclectic. He built at least 60 homes within the community during the latter part of the 19th century and the earlier parts of the 20th century. Most often, these homes were adorned with Victorian trim and had towers or cupola above the roofline. Noted for this feature, he earned the nickname Cupola Case. He built many of the houses that will be discussed later. The only other area that he built homes was on Martha's Vineyard. His architectural style is obvious on this Massachusetts island. Beginning at the south end of Bellevue Avenue, industrialist Albert Sessions in 1903 constructed a home known as the Wedding Cake House. This later became the exclusive men's meeting place, the Town Club, during the 1940s and 1950s. Young's Funeral Home and Ambulance Service owned it during the 1960s and 1970s. The DuPont family in the 1980s took over this facility and is now the DuPont Funeral Home. George W. Mitchell's house and carriage house to its north were constructed in 1873. He owned a mercantile clothing store on Main Street. This was later owned by his son, Julius R. Mitchell. The Funk Funeral Home, founded in 1865, moved here from Prospect Street in the 1940s. Ron Duhame and his wife purchased the business in the 1980s and retained the Funk Funeral Home name. In the 1990s, the Duhames purchased his parents' business, the Duhame Funeral Home on West Street, and moved the business activities to Bellevue Avenue. The carriage house is now used to accommodate funeral vehicles. Across the street, we find the first home of William E. Sessions, constructed by his father in 1885. He and his wife Emily lived here until 1910. This house was later occupied by his son, W. Kenneth Sessions. It was later purchased by John Mellon, becoming a real estate office and eventually apartments. It would appear almost arrogant that William Sessions wanted a more prestigious home as his fortunes increased. In 1906, he purchased the mansion of Nathaniel L. Burge, owner of the N. L. Burge and Son Knitting Factory on Upper North Main Street. This house, which was next to his, was built in 1874 and was considered, according to newspaper records, one of the best built and most costly homes in Bristol. Sessions had the mansion completely demolished after his purchase and began construction of his new home, which took 4 years. This palatial estate was named Belle Eden, meaning beautiful gardens. A staff of 18 servants was required to maintain the house, gardens, pool, greenhouse, grape arbors, and surrounding grounds. Dr. Stephen Wernick owned and maintained this property during the 1960s and 1970s. He provided dental service in a portion of this mansion while maintaining the remainder of the facility. Belle Eden is now owned privately. The present owner has meticulously restored its architectural integrity and elegance. A portion of the property behind the back wall is now bisected by Belle Eden Garden Drive. Charles S. Treadway lived at 63 Bellevue Avenue. His home was torn down and the location utilized for the construction of the Nursing Care Center of Bristol. This is now known as the Pines at Bristol Center for Nursing and Rehabilitation. Julius R. Holly was president of both the Bristol Brass Company and the American Silver Company. He lived at 75 Bellevue Avenue at the corner of Sessions Street. This home was built in 1898. It now serves as a private residence. Charles Terry Treadway lived at 76 Bellevue Avenue, next to and north of Belle Eden. This home was built prior to Belle Eden. Treadway was president of the Bristol National Bank. He also served as chairperson of the Hospital Building Committee, raising funds for the city's first hospital after the pandemic of 1918. Treadway was also chairperson of the committee for the building of the Soldiers' Monument on the Memorial Boulevard. He also chaired the dedication ceremonies for the monument, which became known as the World War I Memorial. The Treadway home is now utilized as apartments. DeWitt Page lived at 91 Bellevue Avenue, as previously mentioned, before he moved to his mansion on Grove Street in 1917. This became the home of Judge William J. Malone for over 40 years. He became the only Bristol attorney ever to argue a case in the United States Supreme Court. Educated at Yale University and adventuresome, he took 9 trips to northern Canada, the Hudson Bay area, and Labrador, charting these unknown wilderness. Malone also created a man-made lake, Pine Lake, on Pine Street in Forestville. This is often referred to as Malone's Pond. Malone died of asphyxiation during a 1961 fire at this home. Zoned as business residential, this previously served as counseling offices and now is a private residence. Moving to the western corner of the intersection of Bellevue Avenue and Center Street, we find the home of Joseph R. Sessions, son of William E. Sessions. This home was built in 1902. He became the eventual president of both the Sessions Foundry and the Sessions Clock Company. This house was used for many years as a state of Connecticut group home for the mentally challenged. Directly across the street was the home of William Tracy, which he purchased in 1906. Tracy was the founder of the Tracy Driscoll Insurance Company. During the 1940s, Thomas O'Brien purchased this house and utilized the first floor as the Bristol version of the O'Brien Funeral Home. This house was later utilized as the offices of accountant John Letizia and also briefly as the Institute of Legal Assistance and Paralegal Training. Attorney Jim Ziogas is now located here. Let's now take a look at several other homes in the Federal Hill area that have been historically significant and have been repurposed for other uses. We'll first explore Maple Street, with the first home being that of Abel Lewis, built in 1793. This was utilized extensively as a tavern in the latter years of the 18th century and during the 1800s, providing meals and beverages for travelers. On the Sabbath day, it not only provided shelter, but also entertainment and a place for socialization in between the Congregational Church's worship services. In more recent years, it has served as Rock's drugstore and real estate agency, as well as a yarn, crafts, and antique store. Today, it is the home of a travel agency and several other businesses. Miles Lewis built a Georgian-style home in 1801 on the south corner of Woodland Street. This house remained with the family until 1954. The Bristol Clock Museum, renamed the American Clock and Watch Museum, purchased this home in the mid-1950s. The Barnes Wing was a later addition and contains some of the beams and paneling from the Ebenezer Barnes House, which was the first permanent residence of our community, being built in 1728. Over 1,500 clocks are constantly on display at this museum, recognizing the importance of this industry to our community's development. The Lawson Ives House, built in 1833, is across the street. This home was later sold to Jonathan C. Brown, owner of the Forestville Manufacturing Company, the largest clock producer at that time within the community. Brown quite often utilized the image of his home on reverse glass paintings that adorned his clocks. This house has, in the recent past, served as offices for Doctors Hirschman, Frank, Murray, and Mastropolo. Now known as Briar Rose, it is now occupied by Dr. Victoria Biondi, who provides gynecology and obstetric services. Across from the American Clock and Watch Museum, a small series of stores, or a small plaza on the west side of Maple Street, has existed for many years. This is where the home of Dr. Titus Merriman once stood. Merriman was an extensive landowner on Federal Hill and donated the land for the building of St. Joseph's Church. This house was taken down in 1925. In times past, a First National store, the Modern Drugstore, Helen's Beauty Shop, Kendall's Gift Shop, and Mrs. H. M. Granger's clothing store were located here. The Parkside Restaurant, after a number of successful years, recently left this location. M&M Carpets, LJ Pizza, and the Bakery on Maple are now located on this site. North of this area, on Maple Street, the home of Ernest R. Burwell was built in 1918 at the intersection of Grove Street. Burwell was the co-owner of the Burwell and Barnes Coal and Ice Company. Standing next to the Page Mansion, this house once served as DeWitt Hall Junior College, named after DeWitt Page. This is now a private home. On the crest of Woodland Street, before it begins its eastern descent to King Street, stood Overlook, the prestigious home of Alexander Harper. Harper was the president of both the Bristol Brass and American Silver companies. When Harper moved in 1929, Harry S. Barnes and his wife Lillian purchased and demolished this home. They constructed a 32-room elaborate home on Founders Drive. This was completed in 1931. Known as Chimney Crest, it contained a basement ballroom. A short distance from this, at the end of Stern Street, Fuller Barnes built a home known as Copper Ledges. Because of the rich copper deposits in the area, he moved into this home in 1925 and a year later added a swimming pool. Prior to his death, he donated his home to the Bristol Hospital to be used as a convalescent care facility. This never happened, and it was sold to serve as private homes. Harry S. Barnes, in 1958, left this home, moving to Green Acres Farm on Perkins Street. Both of these homes became part of Laurel Crest Academy, a private prep school for male students. Later, when females were admitted, it was renamed Devonshire Laurel Crest. Several new buildings, a gymnasium, and dormitories were added. The school lasted nearly a decade during the late 1960s and early 1970s. Known as Chimney Crest Manor, the former Barnes home now serves as a bed and breakfast facility, as well as private homes and offices. One of the strangest and most interesting homes in Bristol is located at the intersection of Center and Main Streets. Built by Joel Case in 1880, this eclectic home is a combination of at least three different architectural styles. It was purchased in 1901 by Samuel J. Large, chief engineer for the American Silver Company. He designed the city seal in 1911. Samuel Large named his home Castle Largo, which it is known by today. It has always served as a private residence. Trinity Episcopal Church, directly across from the Bristol Public Library, burnt to the ground in 1949. The house next to it, built in 1890 at 20 High Street, was utilized for many years as its rectory. Today, it is the home of Janet and Ty Mellon. The Samuel Emerson Root House, located at 51 High Street, built by Joel Case in 1854, has been repurposed many times. Root conducted a business on the site of the former Bristol Press, making clock dials and clock trimmings. His son-in-law, Edward Newell, acquired the property when he died. This house was utilized for over 30 years as a Christian Science, church, and reading room. Over the years, it has also served as offices for several doctors and lawyers. It is now occupied by the Bristol Park and Recreation and Youth and Community Services Department. Moving to more outlying homes away from the Federal Hill area, we first come to the Benjamin Buck House, built in 1729, located at Daniel Road off of Woodland Street before descending to King Street. This is the oldest existing home in Bristol. Thought to be destroyed in earlier times, it remained hidden by trees, brush, and outgrowth for many years. The Woodland Realty Company purchased a large tract of land in 1951 and rediscovered this community gem. Many families lived here in earlier times. It was once willed to the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena, California, but has returned to private Bristol ownership. The home at 21 North Street was built in 1830 for George Mitchell, who was responsible for bringing major clockmakers to Bristol and greatly expanding this industry. Located next to Bingham School, it was later purchased by William Goodsell, owner of the Bristol Grain and Supply Company. This later reverted to his son Samuel, who managed an elaborate antique business, oftentimes called Goodsell's Junkyard. The Rock brothers later conducted an auto part and tire company here. Veteran residents will remember the very large Paul Bunyan statue that was displayed there. This is now located on the business property of the House of Doors in Cheshire. This house was dismantled in 1982 after a disastrous fire destroyed the entire business. The First Bristol Federal Credit Union is now located on this property. The home of Clara Bowman was originally located on East Street, which at that time extended to Queen Street. The name was changed to Hooker Court when it became necessary to shorten it because of a railroad crossing. This is now the location of the Bristol American Legion Post. William Jerome, one of the wealthiest Bristol residents at that time, purchased a home on Jerome Avenue in 1742. Jerome owned 6 slaves who lived in the upper floor of his home. Jerome had purchased 2 slaves from Reverend Samuel Newell, the first pastor of the Congregational Church. When freed, the slaves continued to live and work at this home. This is now a private residence. The final Bristol home to be described is the Seth Barnes House at 523 West Street. Built in 1783, this is the oldest house on this street. This is now the parsonage for the Calvary Advent Christian Church. Forestville, similar to Bristol, experienced a rapid growth in industrial activity during the second half of the 19th century and the early years of the 1900s. One area at the southwest end of Stafford Avenue has never been utilized other than for manufacturing. Starting with the Boardman Dunbar Clock Shop in 1809, a succession of clockmakers from the Manross family used a small wooden factory. The water power was supplied by the Hubbell's Brook, a tributary of the Coppermine Brook. Several other clockmakers eventually utilized this building, including LaPorte Hubbell, who manufactured the first reliable marine clock. Hubbell moved to a larger, more modern factory when his first facility proved to be inadequate. Several factories, including the Young Brothers and the Peck and Way Company, after the clock-making business was waning, began manufacturing screw machine products. One of these started in a small wooden factory and was renamed the Humison Manufacturing Company in 1919. After building a more sophisticated, modern facility, it needed the services of 250 employees in a production of screw machine, spring, wire forms, and metal stamping. The Humison Company in 1950 became a locally operated subsidiary of Stanley Works of New Britain. In 1962, it was absorbed as part of the Stanley Work Company. This land is still being utilized for industrial purposes after 200 years. The Bristol Brass and Clock Company created a subsidiary division in Forestville that utilized its raw brass products. Known as the Burner Shop, it was located near the corner of Stafford Avenue and Brook Street. This factory made brass kerosene burners. When its original facility burned to the ground in 1881, a new wooden-framed 3-story building was constructed. This would be the largest industrial facility within our community. With the advent of electricity, this company was liquidated and sold to the National Marine Lamp Company of New York. This company thrived during the shipbuilding days of World War I, but shortly after the war went bankrupt. To avoid paying future taxes, The building was taken down in 1932. Part of its dam can still be seen today. George Paul's gas station once stood at this location. A convenience store, Power Fuel, and J&M Auto Discount occupy its former site. Prior to the burner shop, another manufacturing company was located here. George W. Brown began the production of clockwork mechanism tin toys in 1856 at a shop at the corner of Stafford Avenue and Brook Street. He is given credit as being the first to do so in the United States. Considered to be extremely valuable commodities, one of these sold at auction for $250,000. Brown also simultaneously initiated the production of lamp burners after the discovery of oil. He sold his shop to the Bristol Brass and Clock Company in 1868, as mentioned in the previous section. Brown designed and built a Victorian mansion at the corner of Church Avenue and Brown Street in the 1870s. This was sold and taken down early in the 1950s. It served as a parking lot for the St. Matthew's Church and now is the location of the St. Matthew's Church. Elijah N. Welch, Bristol's first millionaire, was chief stockholder of the Forestville Manufacturing Company founded by Jonathan C. Brown. He purchased this company after a disastrous fire and severe financial losses. He founded the E.N. Welch Company in 1864, maintaining several facilities located near the center of Forestville. It soon became the largest clock company within the community. While this company was in decline, a major fire destroyed its movement shop located on Central Street on March 17, 1899. This building was located where a general store with a post office and a Grand Army of the Republic, G.A.R. Hall, once stood. In more recent times, the parking lots of both the Forestville Boys Club and Ultimate Wireform were located where the movement shop once stood. After Elijah Welch died, William E. Sessions purchased the E.N. Welch Company, renaming it the Sessions Clock Company. The Sessions Clock Company opened in 1903 and quickly became a major clock manufacturer across the United States. It was a pioneer in electrical clock production, and by the mid-1930s had a variety of 52 different styles. This company was sold to an out-of-town concern in 1956. They switched their production to the making of timing fuses. William K. Sessions, wishing to continue clock production, formed a new company, the New England Clock Company, which first operated in Bristol before moving to Farmington. The Sessions Clock Company closed and was liquidated in 1969. Dabco Industry, a manufacturer of machine parts, purchased the building in 1970. A major fire in 1985 put this company out of business. This building is still being recycled or repurposed for a variety of uses. Amongst other uses, it now contains industrial production, a welding concern, and a photography studio. An accounting office has also occupied the 60 East Main Street Administration Building for a number of years. Frederick N. Manross founded the Manross Hairspring Company in 1877 in the kitchen of the former library. He built a small one-room factory adjacent to this house. This was enlarged several times. The company manufactured precision delicate springs for steam, electrical, and aerospace instrumentation. They were the world's largest producer of these springs, often exceeding 20 million annually. Frederick Manross is pictured here with his wife Sylvia, the first female to receive a Connecticut state driver's license. Frederick died in 1923. His son Arthur took over ownership, renaming the company F. N. Manross and Sons. This company in 1937 became a separate division of the Associated Springs and relocated to the Dunbar's factory on South Street. The Dunbar, Manross, and Wallace Barnes companies in 1948 officially merged and consolidated on Main Street as the Associated Springs Corporation. The former site of the Manross factory on Central Street now serves as a parking lot for the Frederick N. Manross Memorial Library. The Fletcher Terry Company was founded in 1903 by Frederick S. Fletcher and his son-in-law, Franklin Terry, located at 711 South Street, at that time a part of Forestville. A small wooden factory was located on the Terry homestead property. This company manufactured glass cutters and glazing tool and sold internationally. A more modern brick factory was constructed, and this company remained within the community until the late 1960s. The Terry homestead, on which the Fletcher Terry Company was located, served as the home of the Bristol Historical Society from 1973 to 2001. A CVS pharmacy and Thomaston Savings Bank are now located on this property. The final Forestville industry to be discussed is the Superior Electric Company, which was started on Harrison Street in Bristol by Thor Hannon and Alfred Nelson. Manufacturing electrical components, precision motors, and control and variable transformers, they soon moved to Laurel Street. With the need for a larger and more modern facility, they moved to Middle Street, completing their industrial history in Forestville. They recycled the previous location of the Bristol Airport, also known as Stevenson Field. The Superior Electric Company was purchased by the Dana Corporation of Ohio in 1989. Their former building now serves as the ESPN North Campus.
your host, Kurt Barwis. Today, I have a very special guest, Dr. Andrew Lin.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Veterans Corner. My name is Chuck Wooden.
Decision for ourselves for this week, if we want to be made well.
Hi, welcome to the crack of dawn. It's Dawn Lombardi. I'm starting the painting. It's going to be the clips with some water. Love it.
He took me on the sets of Lost in Space, Batman.
Everybody has a story. What's yours? Until next time.